I am so excited to welcome you not only to Jacksonville, but to the launching of the podcast called The Covenant, more specifically, the Sister Covenant. And yes, I did say sister. What is the covenant, the Sister Covenant? It is a circle of friends, my friends for 20, 30, 40 plus years, your friends, all of our friends, coming together in a safe space at a time such as this. We as women of color, we are counted on to nurture our families, our children, our significant others, our spouses, our community, our corporate boardrooms, and everything in between. But who fills our cup? I think about flying, and when we get ready to take off, what is said to us first? Put your oxygen mask on first before you can assist others. And that exactly is what the Sister Covenant is all about. A safe space to encourage, to listen, to cry a little, laugh a lot, but most important, to empower and to fill our cup. Great Sunday morning and welcome. Welcome to the 7th month of the Sister Covenant. So for me, it is not Sunday. I must confess, it is Thursday. And this is a special week for me and for my family. So we are all here together on vacation, and we are celebrating life, and we are celebrating and enjoying family. And we are remembering our precious angel, Lauren Nicole. Lauren was a beautiful baby girl, our first baby, and she was the light of our light. Big sister to Austin and Miles, and full of love, joy, and laughter. Lauren is still a part of our lives, a memory, but more than that, she is our light. I can't say it any better than that. The 19th anniversary of when Lauren left us on this side of the earthly realm was just this Tuesday, June 1st. Lauren would have been 32 on April 9th, this April 9th. So she again is our light, and she is ever a part of us. So this podcast is personal. This podcast is from my heart, and it definitely is a love letter to her, but also to all mothers. Want to share our hearts. So I had the awesome opportunity, and that's what the Sister Covenant is about, gathering powerful women to come together for purpose, to share, to be a little vulnerable, to laugh, and to love. And that's what we had. We sat down with 6 women for an hour conversation, which turned into a 2-hour conversation. So we want to share those conversations with you. We want to bless you and anyone in your sister circle that would be blessed by our love letters from our hearts to our angels that we want to share with all of you. Before I get to that intimate and powerful conversation that I've had an opportunity to be blessed by women old friends and new. Let's just thank you again for being supportive of the Sister Covenant, of wearing that beautiful Sister Covenant merchandise. If you've not had an opportunity to make your purchase, it's not too late. Go to the Sister Covenant website and purchase your paraphernalia. As you know, if you spend $100 or more, your $10 will go to our charitable organization, which is the United Negro College Fund. That fund is supporting not just scholarships, but also emergency needs of college students all around the country. We also ask that you will be a part of the Sister Circle and to join us on Facebook after the Sister Circle. We know that these conversations are rich and they don't always end during the podcast. So you join us on Facebook with your phone or your computer. Search the Sister Covenant. Find the group tab. Click on the group titled The Sister Circle and click Join Group. It's just that simple. And we welcome you to join us for that powerful dialogue after the podcast. And then our contest. We want you to be a part of the Sister Covenant giveaway. So let's cover the rules. Like and share our latest Facebook stream. Subscribe to the Sister Covenant on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Join the email list on our website. Comment done on the image posted on the Saturday before the Sunday stream. Now, who is our winner for this podcast? Mercedes Garrett. Yay, Mercedes. Thank you so much, Mercedes, for all of your support of the Sister Covenant. And we will get her beautiful bling mask to her. Mercedes, please reach out to us and send us your mailing address so we can be sure to get your bling mask, your Sister Covenant mask to you. So now, as I indicated, this is such a powerful, important, and personal conversation to me that I am blessed and privileged to share with all of you. My prayer is that those mothers that are new on this journey, those parents that are new on this journey, and those that may have been on the journey for a little while, like myself and some of these moms that you will meet over the next 2 podcasts. This is part 1, and we will have part 2 weeks from now on June 20th. So I want to get started with our first powerful woman, Betty Cody. Betty is the vice president of the William and Betty Cody Foundation and a loving mom and grandmother. Welcome, Betty. How are you?
Very much for inviting me.
You are welcome, and I am loving that room that you're in. Tell us about that. Is that Caroline's room?
This is actually Caroline's room. I'm sitting at a desk in her room, and she loved her room. When we bought this house, she said, I just want you to know, of all the houses we looked at, there's no house you could have bought where I would have loved my bedroom better.
Very good. Betty, I just thank you for joining the Sister Covenant today. And tell us, if you don't mind, sharing your beautiful daughter, Caroline, with us.
I certainly don't mind, Pat, because one of the things I know is that every time I utter her name, it helps to keep her memory alive. And it's important to my husband and I to keep her memory alive. So I think it's very brave that you've taken on this topic for discussion, because it's certainly not an easy one. And I know that you know that. Now, Caroline was a graduate of Stanton High School. And after she graduated, she went to Xavier University in New Orleans. And once she graduated from Xavier, she went to the University of Florida for medical school. Now, Caroline was a very active person. She was very much involved in high school activities and was elected Miss Stanton for the 94-95 year, and she graduated in 95. While at Xavier, she was very active in politics, serving as president of her class and vice president of the student government. And then she graduated and went to the University of Florida and started getting busy also. Unfortunately, she was a first-year medical student when she was murdered. She had been out studying and actually came home to her apartment, and there was a burglar inside. And there was a fight, and she was 5'2", so he certainly won. He killed her. They don't think he actually meant to kill her, but that he was just trying to fight her off. And it was just so sudden and expected for me and my husband to get the news about her death.
Betty, it's been 21 plus years since that night. So tell us your stages of grieving. We know it goes through the like you said, you couldn't believe it, to the sadness, to the anger. But tell us about your stages of grieving and how you coped with those.
Of course, the first thing was the denial. No one wants to admit that it is their child, especially for us who one day had a very vibrant, healthy child that I had talked to on the phone. And to just think that there were 40,000 students at the University of Florida in Gainesville at the time. So it was such a mystery to me, is how could it be my child out of 40,000 students? But it was my child. And it was a very emotional journey, just dealing with the fact that my daughter that I loved so dearly, and we had such a close bond. It's like, how could this be? How could this be? How could God let this be? Certainly people would say things to me like, well, you know, God doesn't make mistakes. But my whole point to those people was, this was not God. This was not God. God does not deal in that kind of ugliness, because the man that was in her apartment, he really could have left. But unfortunately, when he saw she was there alone, he decided he was going to rape her. So I know that kind of ugliness has nothing to do with God. But I used to ask God all the time, why didn't you protect her? Why didn't you protect my daughter? I asked, not really even thinking I would get an answer, but I asked so much until one day it was as if he actually spoke to me. And his answer to me was, but look what they did to my son. That was the end of me questioning God about why didn't he protect her? But my whole deal with just dealing with the situation and the anger is, even now when I hear stories on the news about children being mistreated, it's like, how can that be? How can anyone do anything to hurt and harm a child? And yet we hear it in the news all the time, and that is truly upsetting to me. I didn't really feel like I bargained with God. I really didn't feel like I had any bargaining chips, really. But what I would think about is the story of Lazarus. And I would think, well, if God could raise Lazarus from the dead, this would be a good time for God to do another great miracle. But yet, in my heart, I knew that wasn't true, but it just didn't even seem feasible. But it was something that I held on to for a while. Could there be another great miracle and raise my daughter from the dead? I really don't think so. So as far as my acceptance, it was a matter of realizing that no matter how much I grieved, how much I really wanted to just see my daughter again, to just hold my daughter again, to just kiss my daughter again, that no matter how much I wanted to happen, it was never going to happen. It just wasn't going to happen. And I grew up in Sunday school, and my father was superintendent of Sunday school when I was growing up. And so we certainly attended on a regular basis. Our goal was to have perfect attendance each year. But one of the things with Sunday school that puzzled me as a child even was the story of Job, because I felt somehow Job got shortchanged. And yet it was a matter that we're supposed to feel good in the end, that Job got restored. And my feeling was, how can you be restored if you lose your children, even if you get more children? That doesn't restore the children you lost. And so that was a part of the story I struggled with. But lo and behold, after my daughter's death, there was a young lady that was already in my life, and she was 9 years old at the time. And her name is Sarah. And I have said so many times, Sarah helps me understand the story of Job. I have a different understanding of Job. Sarah certainly doesn't take Caroline's place. They don't look alike. They don't have the same personality, but she has the same caring. And this is a 9-year-old that told me that she was going to start calling me and checking on me every day to see how I was doing. Now, I said this 9-year-old had more sense than a lot of adults in regards to some of the comments people would make. And people would even ask me that knew about Sarah. They thought maybe she was from a broken home. No, she lived with her mother and father and her siblings. But their family we were all members of the same church. They were church members, and she knew Caroline. And Caroline loved being around children. So even with Caroline growing up in Sunday school, once she finished with the kindergarten class, she was never promoted beyond that because she didn't want to be. She always stayed in the kindergarten class, even when she went off to college. That was where you would find Caroline at Sunday school, in the kindergarten class. So Sarah knew her well, and she kept her word. Some days we talk a while. Some days we just talk for a short while. And today we still talk. I just talked to her yesterday. And she has helped me understand the story of Job, because I've said that was a true mystery. And I do understand that God works in mysterious ways. And even though I asked and asked, why did you let this happen to my daughter? And he answered and said, but look what they did to my son. That resonated so deeply in me that it's something I will never forget. And I have had to realize that we all go through storms and everything is relative. Your storm is relative, even for those that have not lost a child. But I also started to think, what if you only had one child and lost that child? I'm thinking, what could be more hurtful than that? And I still had a son. And so it did make me focus more on what I'm thankful for, what I have, not what I lost, but what I have. And I was so thankful to have a son because my son was a 3-pound, 14-ounce preemie. And when he was born, the doctors had told me they weren't sure if he would make it. So therefore, my thought had been, well, maybe he's just loaned to me when he did live. And now I am so thankful that he did live because now I do have a child. He's married and I have 2 grandchildren. So it does make me focus and make me feel thankful for what I have and how I've been blessed because I know God has still smiled on me. God has still blessed me. And if people want to sit around and think about what they don't have, then it will put you in a sad place. But when you think about what you do have, that raises your spirits and puts you in a much better place. And I'd rather be there because that's one of the things I often said is when I would be sad and having a very sad day, I know Caroline wouldn't want me to be sad. So there are still days I still think that because I'm sure you know, Pat, that the passage of time does help, but the passage of time does not erase it all. There are times I can be out and about and see a mother and daughter just lovingly holding hands that could make me tear up. And I realize that it will probably always be that way. I don't know if I'll ever outgrow that, especially after 21 years.
But Betty, you said something. You said a whole bunch, but the story you shared with us about Sarah, I look at Sarah as your angel here. God sent her to you for that purpose. I know for me, and I think I shared this with you the other day when we were talking, I used to wish, just pray, God, just let me dream about Lauren. Just let me dream. And I never, ever had that. But God sent me angels, 3 great girlfriends that all shared dreams about Lauren. And the dreams were so similar. And in my mind, that was God's way of letting me know through them, she's okay. And she wouldn't come back if she could, because she was dancing in a field of yellow and lavender flowers. And if the 3 friends are listening to the Sister Covenant today, they'll know who they are because they share that vision of her, which made my heart smile. So I know Sarah, even today, makes your heart smile. And you and Bill have made so many children and so many young people smile through your foundation. That has been your loving legacy, I know, too, Caroline. Do you mind sharing that with us?
Not at all, because in the first place, the generosity of our friends was of such comfort to us. My husband had been in the military, so we came here by way of the Navy. And The day that we came to Jacksonville, Florida, we did not know one person, not one. We came from Okinawa, Japan to Jacksonville, Florida without knowing anyone. And 1 year later, we found ourselves saying, can you believe 1 year ago we didn't know anyone? Because we were so amazed at how the community reached out and the friends that we made in such a short time. And after Caroline's death, which was after we had been here 10 years, we even thought back and we said, what if this had happened right after we got here? Because we wouldn't have known people. People wouldn't have responded to us like our friends did. And our friends really lifted us up. And we're so thankful that it was a friend that came to the house after Caroline's death. And when he saw flowers coming, one delivery after the other, and all that plants sitting around, he said, you all really need to give people something to do in lieu of flowers. He said, these flowers are going to last a short time. He said, why don't you think of setting up a scholarship fund that will last longer than these flowers? Of course, that hadn't crossed our minds because we were not in that state of mind. And so that is exactly what we did. And we were so impressed with the generosity of people giving to that foundation. And of course, we gave to it personally ourselves, but it's been amazing. And that foundation has given scholarships every year since that, after Caroline's death. So it's been 21 years, and it's been 21 years of giving scholarships. And so the foundation is something that we really plan to have live on even after we are gone.
Betty, thank you for that. And we're going to share that information so our audience can also bless that foundation and the memory of Caroline as it continues to be a blessing to students all over the Duval County. Is it Duval County specific, Betty, or Northeast Florida?
Well, what we do is this area. So Duval County, as well as surrounding counties, is what we do. We actually give scholarships through the Kappa Foundation. So we give a scholarship each year through that, but we also give through the Sigma Pi Phi Boule, the student recognition program. We give a scholarship through that. And we don't choose who's getting that scholarship, but I tell you, it was amazing that Selena Webster Bass's daughter did receive the Caroline Cody Scholarship through the Boule this year. So we know that we have reached out and touched a number of students with our foundation. And the University of Florida has an endowment set up in Caroline's name. It was actually started by the fourth year medical students in 2000. And we've given to that fund, and we are part of that presentation every year. So we go to Gainesville every year for the honors convocation to be a part of that presentation. And then she graduated from Xavier, and her classmates at Xavier have set up an endowment at Xavier that also gives out scholarships to students. So, you know, that's one good thing that is being done to keep her memory alive, is all of the scholarships that are being given in her name.
Well, Betty, we will certainly at the Sister Covenant put that on our website. So if there is an opportunity for our listeners and those of our audience who would like to make a contribution, we certainly want to make that available to them. Betty, tell us today, what are you doing to fill your cup? How are you doing today?
Well, today I still count my blessings, and I feel that one of the best ways to make Caroline proud is to be a giver. And so I try to live a life that she would be pleased with. And I try to help people. So I continue to be filled with just the blessings of having so many wonderful friends. And I know there's just nothing like friends. And I know that that is a blessing. And I am involved in several things in the community, and that helps keep me busy and going. And I just thank God for the people he's placed in my life. And I had mentioned Sarah, but I have a niece, Lenora, who doesn't live in Jacksonville, but she shows up whenever she even thinks I need her. So I am so thankful. And I know that other people lift me up.
Well, Betty, you are a blessing, and you and Bill both are. And you've been a blessing to me and to my family, to Vincent, our whole family. So we continue to lift one another up. And I want to thank you for being a part of the Sister Covenant and
Well,
sharing the memory of beautiful, beautiful Caroline with us.
well, thank you, Pat. And you know, I feel the Sister Covenant is a blessing. And I've shared with you that, you know, I get nuggets along the way in life that I tuck in my heart and that use them because they help make me a better person. And I think I shared with you a nugget I got from Sister Covenant. And the Sister Covenant placed that nugget there at the right time in my life. And it will always be in my heart. And for that, I thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Such a graceful and beautiful woman, and so wise, so wise. So we thank her for being a part of this conversation with us today. I want to invite our spiritual and wellness contributor, Tanya Grace, to join me in the Sister Covenant studio. Tanya, are you there? Hi, Tanya. How are you?
Great. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. She is such a graceful and such a powerful woman of God, and her journey is one that is truly amazing, and the lives that her and her husband have touched with the foundation have been truly, truly remarkable. So I know we connect on so many levels, Tanya, and we are in this special club together. And you've had an opportunity over the last 6 months to share your Genesis with me. So do you want to share Genesis, a little bit about Genesis before we get into the conversation with the Sister Circle about Genesis?
Sure. So Genesis was our first child, and oh, look at that picture. And we just thought her name was just so apropos, symbolizing a new beginning. And shoot, it was a new beginning for myself and her father at the time. I had a wonderful pregnancy and had excellent prenatal care. And I would say in my last trimester, um, I, my placenta abrupted spontaneously, and I had an emergency C-section. So she was born prematurely, which resulted in her having a lack of oxygen at birth for several minutes. And so she suffered significant brain damage as a result. And it just changed the trajectory of her life, but never our love that we exhibited for her. And it was just a new beginning, parenting for us, as well as parenting a child with special needs. I think all children have special needs because they all require different love. I don't know, even twins, there's no two children alike, but I think every child has special needs that require a special type of love. But it was a new beginning for us, and we journeyed through a new life of hospitals and doctors, and navigated a healthcare system, advocating for a child with special needs. And it was very, very, very eye-opening as well as difficult. And a lot transpired within the years that she was with us. Yes, we did have children, 3 other children in addition to Genesis. And after 8 years that we were blessed to have her with us, Genesis graduated actually June 5th, and graduated to heaven. She wasn't expected to live past 48 hours from the time that she came into our lives. But we were gifted with 8 years. And that's when she transitioned, or we call it graduated.
Tanya, that is so beautiful. And we've never shared the dates that were so close. I didn't know that Genesis graduated on June 5th, and certainly Lauren left us on June 1st. So we have more of my sister in common than we even knew. And I would submit, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me, the mourning that we speak of in our conversation that we're going to have here shortly with Selena Webster Bass, it even started prior to the passing or the graduation. It started when the doctor said something's not quite right, or even prior to the birth when we had a scare and had to do some diagnostic testing and then amniocentesis and those kinds of things. As a 28-year-old, you don't understand. And then everything is well, but then somehow 6 months after birth, something isn't quite right, and you start having these visits and these neurology visits and the other visits, and then you find things aren't right and it's not progressing. So that is a loss, because you have to learn over a period of time that it may not have been the perfect child that you thought you were going to have. You have to accept that maybe you're going to go down a different journey. And certainly I know for us, like you, we were told that Lauren wouldn't be with us beyond 2 years. And she lived 13 years, which was truly, in my mind, a gift to us. It was a gift that God gave us because of the love, because she was truly pure love. That was it. Love and laughter, love for us, love for her two brothers, her little brothers, and love for anybody that had the opportunity to be with her. So I connect totally with what you're saying, totally with what you say. Yeah.
Yes. And one of the facets, and I know we're going to get into it further, as you mentioned, grief is not, I mean, it's typically associated with the death of a loved one, but grief can occur, as we know, during any life transition, whether it's through moving or loss of health or loss of dignity, loss of a job. Um, Grief happens, in so many contexts. So I appreciate you being willing to lead us in this conversation and creating a safe space to talk about, the loves of our lives.
Well, that's a great segue, Tanya. And we're so blessed today to have someone that really is going to lead us in that conversation, a dear friend of mine that I would like to welcome to join us in the studio at this time, Selena Webster Bass. Selena Webster Bass is the founder and CEO of Voices Institute, and also the executive director of Richard Webster Bass Health Institute. Welcome, Selena.
Thank you so much, Pat, for having me. And thank you for this wonderful platform of not only empowerment, but transformation for women of color. So I'm delighted to be here to share my lived experience and my narrative in terms of the grief journey. So thank you. And thank you also, Dr. Tanya, for your expertise.
Selena, we are so appreciative because I know when we've talked about it, all three of us, at different times, we've talked about the fact that as African American women, we're strong. We're strong, and Betty alluded to it. People want to comfort us, but the first thing they want to say is, be strong. And sometimes you just don't feel strong. I mean, and right before we went live, I got a little teary, and Lauren's been gone from us physically for 19 years. But what I like to say is my tears are not weakness. My tears are tears of joy because God picked me out of all the people that could have been picked to be Lauren's mom. He picked me to be her mom. And I hadn't always felt that way. I have to be honest. I hadn't always felt that way. It was more of why me? Why me? Well,
Yeah.
God shared with me on so many levels, so many different times. Why not you? And now I'm kind of proud that I have that badge,
Yes.
but definitely happy to have an opportunity to sit and be among the two of you and join the other women that are waiting for our conversation, because I submit that there are other women out there waiting that may not be quite where we are, not to be that we got it all together, but certainly I believe that we can have this dialogue and hopefully bless some others that may not be quite where we are. So thank you, Selena.
Absolutely. And, I like to say that tears are spa for the soul, that tears are a place of healing for us. So just to tell you a little bit about my journey, I married my hubby, Lester Bass, August 17th, 1996. And we were blessed with our firstborn son, October 2nd, 1997. And he was born with sickle cell disease. And I remember when we first saw him in the hospital, our hearts were just filled with joy when he was born. He had these wide eyes, and we had so much hope for the future of building his life together and of being parents. And Richard was very sick. He was in the hospital almost every month of his life, and we named him Richard after his grandfathers, Richard and Anthony. Richard is my husband's father's name, and Anthony is my dad's name. And so he had a very special place, as all of our children do, in our hearts. And so August 14th, 1999, Richard transitioned. He passed, and it was a very difficult journey for me, for us, for my husband and I. And the grief process for me was complicated grief. It was prolonged grief. And so I experienced depression. I experienced a loss of enjoyment of things that, I used to enjoy doing. And so I went through this process of mourning to mourning. And the first part of that mourning, mourning, is the hidden unspoken places that we don't like to talk about, right? The anger, the denial, the pain. But eventually I reached that place of mourning, the mourning. And so this is a real personal topic for me, as it is for the other women that are on our panel today. And so as I continued to listen to God, and as this experience drew me closer to the Lord, I decided to pursue divinity school. And I was really seeking God about, what direction should I go in terms of my divinity studies. And I did not want to deal with grief and loss, because I had to keep revisiting that pain and revisiting those triggers. But the Lord said, you will transform your pain to purpose. And this is the space that I have for you to speak to other women about how to navigate this process of grief and loss. And so I am so thankful to God for the opportunity just to share nuggets in terms of how I was able to overcome, how I was able to experience a new day, a new morning. And so I thank you, Pat, for this opportunity.
Selena, that is absolutely beautiful. So we thank you in advance, Tanya, on behalf of Tanya and myself. We thank you in advance. So let's get to it. I want to introduce our other panel, because Tanya and I will have the pleasure of you facilitating this dialogue with us and with the other ladies that will be joining us. So I would like to introduce to the Sister Covenant, Michelle Davis Singleton. And Michelle is a travel nurse who is joining us today to talk about her dear son, Mark. And we will also be joined by Cheryl Larkin. And Cheryl will also be joining us today to speak about her beautiful, beautiful daughter, Winter. And last but not least, we will be joined by Trinell. And Trinell Howard is an attorney, and she will be joining us to talk with us about her beautiful, beautiful angel, Michaela. Ladies, welcome, welcome, welcome to the Sister Covenant and this very, very, very special podcast. This is truly going to be a sister circle from the heart. So it's a safe space, ladies. We don't have to wear that S in front of anybody. We can be ourselves. And with that, I want to really just turn it over to a dear friend of mine who we discovered we had something in common at church in the children's ministry some 20 years ago, or I guess it was, right about 19 years ago now. And it was right after Lauren's passing that Selena shared with me her beautiful story about Richard. So I want to turn it over to Selena, who will guide us in this journey today.
Yeah. And again, Pat, I want to thank you, because at that moment after Richard passed, I remember seeing you, and there was a look that you had in your eyes that said, me too, that I understand and I can relate to your experience. And that always encouraged me when I would see you on Sunday mornings, that I wasn't alone in this grief journey. So again, thank you for that connection. So to the women, thank you all for your transparency, because this is a sensitive topic. It's not easy to talk about our pain and our unspoken places of hurt, but we know that God has a special calling for us in terms of encouraging not only ourselves and healing ourselves, but also healing other women that may be in places of grief. We're experiencing all types of grief. Loss of routines. Many of our children have had disruptions of school, and we're not even able to grieve our normal way, right? Our typical rituals. We're not having our repasses because of limitations of COVID-19. But today, our discussion is specifically focused on the loss of a child from the maternal lens, from a mother's lens, from Black mother's lens. And so we know that the experience of grief is a natural process, right? It's a response to death. But the experience of bearing a child seems unnatural, and parents don't expect to bury their children. And so there is this unspoken pain that is oftentimes, even for me, difficult to articulate with the transitioning of a child. And so I just like for us to start off just talking about our own lived experiences in terms of the transition and in terms of the grief process. So Michelle, if you don't mind, if we could start with you in terms of talking about Precious Mark, and briefly talk about your lived experience in terms of his transition and what that experience was like for you.
Hello, everyone. Where do I begin? I guess I can start first with my husband, who is Mark. I got married, and we were a little older when we got married, so we decided that we were going to start trying to have a family. And I started having difficulties. A lot of tests, a lot of surgeries, and ultimately the answer was, you are just going to have a very, very difficult time having children. We did insemination, the whole 9 yards, which made me extremely depressed. I can remember just being in a complete funk and not being able to know what I wanted to do. My desire was to be a mother as long as I could remember. And saw a very good article on TV one day about adoption. And remember turning to my husband and saying, we talked about adoption when we were getting married. We may just, instead of having two and adopting two, we may just have to make that our mission, to become parents. So we did. We went through the process, and were truly blessed with Mark Gerard Singleton II. And literally the day that we picked Mark up, he was 6 months old. He looked like my husband. His baby pictures matched my husband. The joke within our friends was, wow, man, you really had a child by somebody else and just told Michelle you needed to adopt a child. Because he looked that much like Mark. And he was my joy. So I went from a person who wanted to be the mother of 4 children to the person who was good with being the mother of 1. If you saw him, you saw me. If you saw me, you saw him. And we just kicked it. We went everywhere, whatever he wanted to be a part of, we did those things. But little Mark, as we called him, until he got, just before he died, he wanted to be then Gerard, said, I want a sibling. I want a sibling. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, right, that'd be nice. To the point he was telling people he had a sibling. So we went through the track again of saying we wanted to try to get pregnant again, but that's not what the Lord had for us. And we adopted a set of twin girls, Maria and Maura. And life was great. I stayed home with the girls and took Mark to school and picked up Mark from school and volunteered and did all those different things. And then on June 10th, we were driving and we were going to pick up Mark from work, and it had been raining that day. And we literally had stopped at the store just before we got on 295 and looking for skates for Mark. And I remember we couldn't find the skates, and I felt really guilty that I couldn't find them. And I knew I was running late. And I said, hey, can we get these later? And he said, yeah. And I said, I'm so sorry I'm not getting these for you. And he said, oh, Mom, it's okay. And I said, and you know, Mother's Day just ended. And he said, you are my gift. And my heart was so full, and we got in the car and we hit a slick and the car spun out. And tragically, Mark passed away due to the accident. We hit a tree and thus forth. He was in the safest part of the van, but that was not God's plan. So the stages, a lot of anger because I was driving the car. So anger came from the point of, I worked so hard to become a mother. How can you take my child from me? Depression because I took Mark's namesake from him. So there was a lot of grief that I went through, of feeling the guilt of being the driver, the guilt again of taking our only son, the girl's only brother. And when you say the dreams, I remember it like it was yesterday. I had a dream of him in the suit that he was buried in. And I'm finding him and we're walking and I'm trying to get out. We're like in a building with stairs and I'm trying to find my way out. And he stops and he puts his hand on me and he goes, hey, Mom, I'm good. And I woke up. And I remember calling my mother and saying, Mark is fine. He just told me that in a dream. So then it was the process of trying to figure out how to move on without the physical part of Mark in my life. We used to call our living room the museum because our walls were covered with pictures of Mark. And then when the girls came along, there was like a little corner at that point for them. But you know, being able to see him in those pictures and the different stages of his life, the picture I have with him for this discussion is my first picture that I took with him as a baby. But it has been 22 years on June 10th. It will be 22 years that Mark transitioned to become my angel. When I see rainbows, I think of him. No matter where I am, when I see a rainbow, I say, hello, Mark. I know that's your message to tell me hello. And he's just my angel. I know he's kept us safe. He watches over the girls. He welcomed my parents and my grandparents to heaven. Because he transitioned before my parents did. And I can just see him there welcoming me, Mom, Papa with open arms. But, you know, I am in my mourning, MORNING, because I know that he is there always with me. And June 10th will come and many years I would go on 295 and I knew the spot and I would leave flowers as a memorial to him. And his ashes are at our house and I pass by it and touch that urn, but I have peace. And my advice when I see someone is I never tell anyone I know how you feel, because I can't know how you feel, but I understand the pain and the transition time that you are going through. I remember going to Selena when little Richard died and just wanting to hold her because I understood that pain. And we have just been able to, as you say, we're in a group that we have never wanted to be in, but we are. And I've just always wanted to be a blessing to someone else, to be able to go through those moments. I still have my moments.
Yes.
Still, yes, a couple days ago, just driving, and it just kind of came over me that, whew, you know, it has been almost 22 years that he will be 30 in next month. Would have been it would be his 30th birthday.
Yes.
So I have those moments that with him, but I know that I was blessed
Yes.
to have him, and he is the reason that I have those two beautiful daughters that I just came from seeing this morning. But he's the reason, because I had gotten to the point that I was going to be fine with just him, and God said, let me just help him help her, because his time is not going to be as long as she thinks it is going to be.
Yes.
So I need to be able to give her a gift and give Mark a gift so that they can continue on. Faith, if it had not been for my church family and Bishop Rudolph McKissick Jr. especially, because I remember the day it happened right after the accident. We were at the hospital, and I remember saying, I cannot do this. I want it over. And I just dropped to the floor. And you all know Bishop Rudolph McKissick Jr., you know how he is. Very, very dressed always. And he got on the floor with me. And he said, Mickey, we are here for you. And it was so shocking to see him on the floor. I said, what are you doing? Get off the floor. It's dirty. You need to get up. But it got me out of where I was, because I couldn't imagine being able to do this without him.
Absolutely. And Michelle, I remember the times that you would come and embrace me at church as well, and provide and to be that source of comfort. And there's so much richness in what you shared. You talked about one of the stages of grief, the anger stage, and oftentimes we are angry, and sometimes we're raised to say that, hey, you don't question God, but God can handle our questions,
Yes,
right?
he can. Yes, he can.
God can handle our questions. And, I remember also asking those why questions. Why Richard? Why didn't you take me instead? He was just 22 months of age, And so part of that moving from mourning, MOURNING, to mourning was really reframing my questioning and asking God, what is the lesson that you want me to learn? And how can I transform this pain into purpose? And so when I, was able to reframe that questioning and surrender to God and say, hey, Lord, okay, I can't handle this on my own. Just like you said, Michelle, in terms of just releasing, right? That's when the glory came. That's when the mourning, emerged. And so I am just so thankful for your testimony and for your joy. And I'm so glad that you're on the other side, because a lot of times we get stuck in that meantime, that time between, morning and midnight, right? But God has blessed us to still have our joy and to share that joy with other women. So thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you so much for allowing me.
Sister Tramiel, tell us about Michaela.
Sure. Michaela was just a bright and infectious child. She was 4.5 when she, or almost 5 when she passed. Those pictures, she was maybe a little younger. She died in a pool accident, and so of course the family was not ready for that experience. I am the youngest of my mother's children, and so I was the last to have a baby, and so that was it hit our family pretty hard. My husband's family as well, because his mother, although she was the oldest, she had no grandchildren. So Michaela was spoiled rotten. She was loved by so many, and when she passed on June 16th. It was just a shock. And she was out of town in Florida, in Miami, and I was in Georgia. And so I felt, very helpless to not be there. But I had a village of sorority sisters who were there as we were waiting to find out what was going on, because I initially didn't know, what had happened. When I first got the call, I thought she had a pool accident, but that, she was going to be okay. I never dreamed that she was not going to make it. And, to get that call was just, numbing. And it was surreal, but I had a whole lot of support from family and friends. And when I think about sort of the stages of grief, I would say that disbelief was initially that first stage, I guess, of denial, and of just, I guess it was a two-sided coin, because I grew up in the church. My ex-husband is a minister, and so we're people of faith, and so immediately the questions of God, what's going on here, and why Michaela, and I'm still not clear on those answers, but we sort of struggled through those moments of sort of emptiness or isolation, and tried to do things that we thought would keep her memory alive. Her school dedicated a bench in her honor that's still at the school, as well as we created a foundation through my sorority, which is the Michaela C. Fishburne Scholarship Endowment. And so we've done that. We were able to capitalize it pretty quickly because, as many have shared, just the love that, your family and friends, they want to do something. And so, this was definitely a way that we could put that love into action. And, so daily it is, it's a struggle, but it's, she lives inside of me. I say her name often. If you meet me and you have never met Michaela, you will come to know her, because I talk about her often, and I'm okay with that. Although for some people it makes them uncomfortable, but it's healing for me.
So much, Tramel, for sharing your experience. One thing that really stuck out for me was the word guilt. And you mentioned that there was some guilt involved with your child transitioning. And I experienced that as well, because I was not at the hospital when Richard passed. My husband took him to the hospital because it had become a routine for us. Whenever a child with sickle cell has fever, they have to go to the hospital to make sure that it's not a bacterial infection. Yeah. And so in my mind, it was like, what if I would have been there? And maybe I could have done something differently, or maybe I should have gone to the hospital too. So there was so much guilt that I was carrying, that only the Holy Spirit could help me release. And so, so I could really relate to that part of your narrative and lived experience. And then the other thing that really stood out in what you said was about the power of connections and how involved your family was in terms of being a source of support. And what I like to emphasize is that it's important that we have connections, but the right connections, because oftentimes people will judge you. Oh, you should be over that by now. That happened like, 3-4 years ago, but, there is no timeline for grief. And depending on the circumstances, if it's tragic, if it's due to an illness, all of that impacts our grief journey. And so, having a tribe, having a clan, having connections that allow you to be honest about your emotions and to be honest about your feelings is so important. So I love the fact that you emphasize the importance of family and having connections. And Michelle, you also mentioned the, faith, and we're going to get to that as a source of connection as well. And then Sister Tramiel, you talked about how you've made meaning through your foundation and scholarships, and we're going to talk more about that too. So thank you again for sharing your lived experience and journey as well. And so Sister Cheryl, we'd like for you to tell us about Precious Winter and your experience with grief and loss, and maybe a stage that was challenging for you and how you were able to cope and overcome.
Sure. Winter was the love of our life. My husband and I got married in 2009, and it was the second marriage for both of us. We had much older children from our previous marriages, and after we got married in 2009, in 2010, I found out that I was having a baby. And I was very surprised, being well into my 40s at the time and not really trying to have a baby. But Winter was born, and I want to go back a little bit. So when I found out that I was expecting, my doctor immediately said, well, we have to send you to a specialist because you're high risk. And I was in fairly good, very good health, but I couldn't make the connection at first. But basically, they put you in that category of high risk due to your age. And to make a long story short, throughout my entire pregnancy, I had a wonderful pregnancy. I was always waiting to see if something bad was going to happen, or if my blood pressure was going to rise, or if I have other issues. But everything was just wonderful. The blood pressure was regular. I was feeling great. I was glowing. I had a scheduled C-section that went perfect as well, and we delivered a bouncing, beautiful little girl. Winter was born 4 days after Christmas, and the year was 2010. And she was just the love of our life. Everything was great. She was the glue that really helped guide our blended family. And basically, it was my husband, myself, and Winter starting over, well into our 40s with a young child. She kept us on our toes. She was a lot like my husband and myself, very outgoing, very loving. And Winter, at the time of her death, was 3.5 years old. And she, unfortunately, accompanied me to a public event. It was a fundraiser hosted by my sorority and another organization. And we arrived at the event and was greeting everyone, having a great time. I was holding my daughter's hand, and I won't get too much into the story because it, again, is very painful. But a gate collapsed from the building and crushed my daughter to death. So there basically was nothing that I could do. And in terms of, nothing I could do to rectify the situation. I was in shock, of course, in denial. And even going into the 7th year of when this has occurred is still very, very painful. So when we talk about the different stages of grief, denial was very difficult, was, one that I struggled with because I just could not believe that I could be there holding her hand and surrounded by so many friends and people just having a good time, and for my daughter to be the one that was impacted and killed. And that was June 28th of 2014. In terms of grief, I also my husband and I both struggled with sadness. I struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, having witnessed the death of my daughter. But I was just so grateful when it happened for loving family and friends and sorority sisters and my husband's fraternity brothers who literally wrapped their arms around us, as well as a praying church and a pastor that really invested time with my husband and myself consistently, spending time with us, guiding us through grief counseling, as well as a licensed psychologist who my husband and I participated in intense counseling for many, many years, individual counseling as well as group counseling. So that really helped a lot. But, it's a difficult journey hearing everyone's stories and just thinking about the pain. Anger is another emotion that I really struggled with and still struggle with, but has gotten much better because I had to get to a point where I was able to accept. I guess the right word is accept. Not accept the action or the accident or the occurrence. Not so much accept that, but accept that God chose me. He took Winter, or Winter was taken, and there was literally nothing that I could do about it, but to continue to live. And, we, as Sister Trammell said, she says her daughter's name very often. We say Winter's name very often. We incorporate her in our lives. In fact, I'm sitting in the purple room now. Purple was her favorite color. And we just got to a point where we had to come out of that season and start living again. It was very, very difficult. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Sister Cheryl, for sharing your journey and your narrative with us. And my heart just, beats for you in terms of your loss with precious Winter. You spoke about grief counseling. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because oftentimes in the African American community, we do not want to admit that we need support, that we need help. And oftentimes, as the strong Black woman, a strong Black matriarch, we don't oftentimes like to admit that, yes, I need some support beyond, what I'm doing in terms of prayer and in terms of fasting or, other, forms of spiritual support. And so, I think it's important that we acknowledge the role of faith, which is absolutely at our core, who we are, and has been, a force in terms of bringing us through so much from enslavement to where we are today, and even what we're experiencing right now in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement. But also, embracing licensed professionals that can help us in terms of discovering answers that really lie within ourselves, So, really having those honest conversations and being able to ask those tough questions in terms of the anger, the guilt, the pain. It took me a while to admit that, yes, I'm at a point now where I need to seek mental health counseling and to seek grief counseling and to speak with someone beyond just my hubby or just family and, other forms of support. So I'm so glad that you mentioned the importance of, yes, my faith is absolutely is important, but also embracing grief counseling and other forms of support as well. So thank you so much, Sister Cheryl. Thank you.
Wow. What powerful, powerful, powerful comments. Can't wait to share part 2 with you on June 20th. So for now, I just want to say blessings to all the parents, especially those moms out there. No matter where you are on your journey, just want you to know that we are here for you. And you will get additional information of how you can be a part of this very powerful and important conversation. So we will see you back in 2 weeks on June 20th. And until then, as always, be bold, be brilliant, be brave and beautiful, my sisters, and be blessed.